greater momentum. Differences on intellectual property rights, especially in the pharmaceutical sector, may remain, but the decibel levels of the to and fro debate have reduced, signifying that rational understanding and solutions are not beyond our reach. We come, India and America, from very different parts of the world. Geographies, cultures, historical experiences, the levels of our development, all separate rather than unify us. But distances telescope in the world of today, and our alignment of interests, whether they be counterterrorism, peace and development in Afghanistan, the mutual threat we face from the Hafiz Saids and the Zakiur Rahman Lakhvis who seek to blight our lives, our allegiance to the standards of democracy and freedom, openness and good governance diminish the earthly distances between us. Also, the presence of a 3 million strong Indian diaspora in the United States imparts the calculus of American understanding of India with far more depth and resonance today than ever in the past. This being a season of parades, let us for a moment stop to reflect on the past 60 years when rainstorms have come down on the parade of our relations. Steadier hands and a more rounded vision could help prevent a repetition of such setbacks. Driven by far-seeing leadership, our bureaucracies also need to move beyond mindsets and behavioral instincts honed by past experiences to embrace present imperatives and priorities. This cannot be a relationship for the faint-hearted or for closed minds. Much is said of the China factor in our relations. In my experience, it is my understanding that neither of us seeks an exclusion or isolation of China. Each of us has our set of interests and compulsions in dealing with China and for transacting mutually beneficial relations with that country. India's Act East policy must envision how the contrasting visions of India and China are to be reconciled in the mapping of 21st century Asia. So too for the United States, which is an Asia-Pacific power and has enormous stakes in the peace and prosperity of continental and maritime Asia. The dialogue on East Asia between India and the United States acquires greater salience and relevance given the absence of clearer understanding of China's role in our present and future and the crucial life and livelihood-sustaining importance of the trade routes that crisscross the contested maritime expanses of Asia. Similarly, our concerns about South Asian regional trends and developments are not easily understood by the United States, especially when they pertain to Pakistan. While it is true the dehyphenation of India-Pakistan has taken place in the minds of policymakers in Washington, thought patterns from the past have not all been jettisoned. India has to shoulder the responsibility of being far more assertive in seeking American support for its concerns regarding terrorism directed against it from Pakistani soil. Greater coordination, consultation, and information and intelligence sharing to enable contingency planning against future terror attacks of the 2611 or Peshawar genre is a must. In the ultimate analysis, a strong and developed democratic India is good not only for India but also for our partners, the United States being the most prominent of them. As was said, I remember in the context of China very long ago, this relationship between India and the United States is the most important of the most important relationships. The United States must therefore be a staunch believer and an enthusiastic investor in this relationship. That, in all likelihood, is what President Obama is signaling as he flies 10,000 miles across our globe to Delhi to watch the ceremonials and the parade on January 26th. This trend is what we need to build on and not allow to dissipate. This is what should become the new normal for the relationship, forever onward, taking incremental steps that strengthen our cooperation against the threats that face us, build trade and commercial interaction, enable the fulfillment of our security and counterterrorism goals, promote clean energy generation, enable our youth to build job skills, and intensify technological and scientific development. The fallow years in our relationship should be put behind us once for all. The world is watching. If I were to define a set of priorities that should govern this relationship from India's viewpoint, I would venture to suggest the following. Strengthen defense cooperation, including co-development and manufacture in India with American inputs of technologically advanced defense systems, and this works in very well into our Make in India plans also. Build resistance against terrorism and strengthen homeland security, and resolve the difficulties relating to the implementation of the civil nuclear deal so that the promise and the potential of nuclear energy generation with American participation is not a promise denied. Every small step taken will add up ultimately to substantive growth and consolidation of the relationship. Our capacity to safeguard our sovereignty and our independence is in no way jeopardized by this. Time and again, India, we have proved that we are capable of defending our interests. The experience of the last 60 years has taught us so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rao. Let me try and sort of set the stage for what's going to be a stimulating day. And your speech, in a sense, has given us the broad contours of this relationship. But let me, like a good journalist, look at the glass as half empty rather than half full. Diplomats tend to look at the glass as half full. I'll look at the glass as half empty. You mentioned that an American diplomat, before Barack Obama arrives in the country, described the relationship as transformational. Do you believe it's transformational already? Or do you see somewhere it's still rooted in suspicion and still one-sided? Do we need the Americans more than they do? Jairam Ramesh famously said, Yankee, go home, but take me with you. Is it still a bit of that we still are rooted in a bit of the past suspicions and yet desperately wanting to reach out in some way to America more than the Americans want us? Is it an equal relationship, ma'am?
Well, you're talking of a relationship between equals. I wouldn't use the word equal relationship so much as saying it's a relationship between two equal, very important nations on the world stage. As far as the attitudes and the approaches that each or either country takes to the relationship, I have spent a number of years in America. I first went there more than 3 decades ago, and I've been witness to the very palpable, tangible change in the way Americans view India. So the attitude, the cross-section of people's opinions relating to India has become far, far more positive than it used to be in the past. And I also see how the Congress, both the Senate and the House of Representatives, when you talk to the members of both houses, the opinions they express about India, it is true that they, from time to time, are exasperated about some policy or the other that we follow. But there's a great deal of hope and expectation about India, about the role that it can play in the world, about the difference it can make, both here in Asia and across on the world stage. So I would say that the glass isn't half full. I guess half empty. I suppose we could certainly seek to fill it up more.
Let me give you concrete examples. When it comes to defense technology, for example, when it comes to the Civil Nuclear Liability Bill, there's a general sense that the Americans aren't willing to give as much as they want to extract out of the relationship, that it's purely utilitarian. It's American business which wants to come into India, which wants, whether it's FDI and retail, they want India to do A, B, C, D, without giving us enough in return. Do you believe in that sense that have Americans truly, defense technology, the civil nuclear liability, understood India's concerns enough? Have they understood our concerns when it comes to, let's say, FDI and retail, that it's not so easy to push through what they would like to see? Or does that simply just exasperate the Americans, the word you used?
Well, I don't see why we shouldn't put across our concerns emphatically where our interests are involved or where our interests are threatened. So I believe that the Americans appreciate that kind of openness and candor, and we should continue to stick to our guns on issues that really are seen as not promoting our interests or not promoting our domestic economic development or the idea of inclusiveness where our development is concerned. So I see no harm in both countries adopting candid, open, frank positions on issues of concern, but that doesn't diminish or detract from the possibility of agreeing to cooperate in so many areas. And I believe even on defense technology, the matter that you expressed, I believe that today, especially the post-Modi government coming to power, there is much more enthusiasm, and it's not enthusiasm that is not founded on real needs or concrete marshalling of facts and ideas. There is certainly much more enthusiasm, much more activity, much more willingness to do on both sides when it comes to all the areas that you mentioned. And we have to be a little more patient. The media tends to look for a harvest the morning after the seed is sown. So I don't believe that will happen.
I get it. The media is living in the world of 24/7 television, which wants breaking news between India and America virtually every day. But there's a sense that America's business is business. And therefore, if India doesn't open up its markets, they'll even go to a Philippines, they'll go to a Sri Lanka, they'll go to an Indonesia. Why would I come to an India unless we provide open access to our markets? And now we have our genuine concerns there. Do you therefore believe that are we a priority for the United States? Is Washington ready to be patient with India? And the fact that this is a democracy where decisions can't be taken overnight in the manner that they could perhaps in a more authoritarian regime. Is America willing to be more patient with India in your experience?
I think there's a constant learning curve in the relationship, and this is a relationship which gets constantly honed and constantly better based on our experiences in the past. So I think there is a far greater degree of patience in the United States when dealing with India today.
Let me ask you the point that you made. You said that the relationship, in a sense, has been dehyphenated. The Indo-Pak relationship is reaching the stage of dehyphenation. And yet from time to time we'll have Indian leaders putting pressure on America in a sense, or at least doing it perhaps now that you're no longer actively serving, you can tell us whether there was pressure put on the Americans to get us Lakhvi, to get us a Dawood, to ensure that at least Pakistan delivers on ABC when it comes to terror. Is there enough being done in your view by the Americans to get Pakistan to deliver on specifics? Or are we still not able to put enough pressure on America to get us what we want when it comes to terrorism across the border?
Well, if you're talking of a dream list, all the 12 things you want for Christmas, maybe that's not happening. But counter-terrorism cooperation between India and the United States has certainly taken off. And there's much more happening. This is not something we can obviously discuss before, in the public space.
Of course we can.
Of course. But I remember Mr. Jaswant Singh on this. We can't conduct diplomacy in an amphitheater. So we have to remember that. But there is a lot happening in terms of information exchange, intelligence gathering, and we're on the same side of the street when it comes to dealing with all the elements that you spoke of. Ultimately, I suppose a lot depends also on the strengthening, the buttressing, the honing of our own capabilities in dealing with threats to our homeland, in making sure that a 2611 doesn't happen again. And we have to be, essentially, when it comes to a big nation like India, we have to learn to take care of this business ourselves.
That's interesting you mentioned 2611, because I know that intelligence officials in this country believe that America was less than honest when it came to actually sharing intelligence and information ahead of 2611. That is, it rankles our intelligence services at times that, we can reach out to the Americans, but the Americans don't, again, share information which was critical. Many believe that we could have even avoided possibly 2611 if Western democracies, including the United States, had shared information that was available to them. You were there at the time. Do you believe that the Americans did not share the information that they should have about Headley and other operatives in this area, and have they learned their lesson?
Well, I suppose, if you really get into the might have been scenario, a lot could have been prevented. I am not, of course, privy to all the discussions that took place between our intelligence agencies, so I really don't want to seek to assume too much knowledge on the subject. But all I can say is my understanding is that today, and we're 8 years down the line from what happened on that dreadful day in Bombay in November of 2008, I think there's much more cooperation, much more sharing of information and intelligence, and much more taking into account such information in making our assessments than there was in the past.
Before I open this up to questions both from viewers and the audience here, if I were to, as we look ahead to the Obama visit, 1, 2, 3, the three things that you see the Prime Minister and the US President discuss, would I be right in saying that while we in the media will talk about terrorism and Dawood and Lakhvi because it makes interesting headlines, the actual truth is that climate change, energy security, and possibly trade and defense technology transfers are actually what will dominate the conversation? Do you believe the dialogue actually has therefore moved well beyond what the media would headline, let's say, 10 years ago, which would have been terror, which would have been about Pakistan, that there'll be much less talk on the table when the two leaders meet about Pakistan, and much more about futuristic issues like climate change, energy security, defense technology transfers?
I think that it will very much be in evidence, and if you're looking into a crystal ball on the outcomes of the visit, I think much of what is likely to happen will go to sustain and to strengthen that central sort of principle that you're talking of a development-centered partnership when it comes to India and the United States, apart from the strategic dimensions that you spoke of, about what happens in the region, what happens, when it comes to the Indian Ocean or the Indo-Pacific. But in the relationship itself, when India and Prime Minister Modi has said very clearly what his central focus is, it's basically on development and good governance. And therefore, issues like what you mentioned. I spoke of higher education.
You spoke of smart cities, for example.
I spoke of smart cities. I spoke of infrastructure collaboration. I referred to the science and technology partnership where, there are so many unsung, untold stories that never catch the attention of the media because I guess, it doesn't sort of, cause that...
Basically, you're saying Dawood makes the headline, science and technology doesn't, tragically.
Absolutely. Dawood should continue to make the headlines. I'm not saying that. We shouldn't take away the focus from those central concerns. But let's also understand that for the unknown Indian, as I always say, or the Aam Aadmi, what is it that this relationship can do? This has to be a people-centered relationship, in my view.
That's interesting because, you know, in this city, particularly the strategic affairs community always wants to look at the big strategic issues, when the irony is perhaps that the relationship has actually gone well beyond that and is increasingly exploring other issues. Let me open this up to the audience and get in questions. Dinesh Trivedi, at the moment of the Trinamool Congress, we don't know whether in a few weeks he'll be with the ruling party. So before Mr. Trivedi, as someone who's been a former railway minister, someone who's looked and tracked this relationship closely, do you believe that that this relationship is truly transformational? Do you have a question for the ambassador?
I have no question, but I was just imagining while I was sitting here that when you have the next round table, I see a Statue of Liberty. Would you have a Statue of Unity also by the side? Because there cannot be a
Statue of Unity.
Statue of Unity.
Meaning Sardar Patel's statue.
Sardar Patel.
Right.
Because that Statue of Unity is also related to Statue of Liberty. Unity and liberty go side by side. But that was on the lighter note.
No, effectively you have now told us on the round table which side of the table you are. We now know which side of the table you are.
I have always on two sides of the table.
Right. You're keeping all options open.
Because it is a round table.
Okay. Okay. But yes, you wanted to make a point.
You see, the natural relationship between United States and India is education and health. I have always said कि दो गोलियां हैं, एक बंदूक की गोली और एक दवाई की गोली. दोनों गोलियों को यदि खत्म करना है, तो I think this oldest democracy and the largest democracy, it is a natural relationship. Most of our people who can afford look up to America for what? Not huge cars, not big houses. They look upon America for higher educations, for research. And I can tell you, we need to get into that kind of relationship. If you want to get rid of the enemies, what Ambassador mentioned, that's the only way to go.
Okay, that's it.